around us all we see. Perhaps they might get you, but for sure they're aiming at me. They buy here cause it's the cheapest.
This is Steve Zeltzer with Workweek, and these past couple of weeks, everyone has heard in the news about the shutdown of USAID by the Trump administration. And there are many hearings about it and debate about the numbers of people who were lost their jobs and also the effect of the cutbacks and the shutdown of the USAID. But one of the nonprofits that U.S. government funds, which has not been reported on, is called the National Endowment for Democracy. And this nonprofit foundation has played an important role, not just on international relations for the United States, but also in the operations in the AFL-CIO. And a component is the AFL-CIO Solidarity Center. We're going to be talking about the closure of this agency and what it means to working people, to trade unionists, why it happens, and also why there's been no report by the leadership of the AFL-CIO of the closure of their main international operation. And joining us today is Kim Sipes. He's a professor emeritus, Purdue University, a member of the Labor Education Project on the AFL-CIO, and Frank Hammer, past president of UAW Local 909, who was also with the Labor Education Project and the AFL-CIO. So, Kim, why don't you talk about what the Solidarity Center is for workers, and most workers do not know about this international operation of the AFL-CIO. So why don't you talk about what it is? And
Okay, Steve, thanks for having me. The AFL-CIO has been operating internationally for over 100 years. These operations have been unknown to most members, in fact, even most leaders. They have been funded by the U.S. government around the world. In 1983, Ronald Reagan started the National Endowment for Democracy.
Good morning and welcome. It's good to have you all here to help celebrate the launching of a program with a vision and a noble purpose. The National Endowment for Democracy is, just as we've been told, more than bipartisan. It's a genuine partnership of Republicans and Democrats, of labor and business, conservatives and liberals, and of the executive and legislative branches of government. It's such a worthwhile, important initiative that I'm tempted to ask, why hasn't it been done before? Well, we're doing it now, and it's largely because of the hard work of good people. Chuck Manat, Frank Fahrenkopf, Dante Fassell, Bill Brock, Lane Kirkland, Mike Samuels. You have my heartfelt thanks and warmest congratulations.
And one of the agencies put in there was the AFL-CIO. Now, they called their international operation, well, they changed after 97, and it became the International Labor Solidarity Center, and then later just Solidarity Center. But it's the AFL-CIO's foreign operations. It's controlled by the AFL-CIO Executive Department, in fact, probably a small number of them, and it determines AFL-CIO operations around the world. Now, I must say they have never given, they've never told their members about this. They've never given an honest report that can be independently verified by researchers. They are operating behind the backs, but in the name of AFL-CIO members. So when you hear Solidarity Center, they try to say, well, it's a sort of a detached section of the AFL-CIO. No, it's not. It's right at the center. Their offices are on the 8th floor of the AFL-CIO headquarters in Washington, D.C. So Solidarity Center supposedly is building international solidarity relations. The interesting thing, and I think this is what you're touching on, Steve, is that they are wanting to build international labor solidarity on the basis of governmental funding. And so they've gotten over 90% of their budget, certainly since 1983, from the government. Actually goes back into the early 60s. And my back of the pocket estimate is over $1 billion over this time that's been unreported to its own members. It's been kept secret and hidden. So now this is coming to light.
And Frank, were involved. Your brother worked for the NED, and you have some familiarity with it in Latin America and Colombia. What is this mean to you, and what's the importance of workers in this country understanding about the Solidarity Center and its closure by the shutdown of the National Endowment for Democracy? What's behind it?
Yeah, just a couple of facts that I want to throw in there. There was a precursor to the Solidarity Center in all three continents. In Latin America, it was once called the American Institute for Free Labor Development, and that's the agency that employed my brother starting in the early 60s. And my brother was an operative and a country program director for the precursor to the Solidarity Center. And he was gunned down in 1981 by reactionary forces in El Salvador, where he was working, and he was working with campesinos. So a couple of years later, and that's when Ronald Reagan replaced the original funder for AFL, which is the CIA, to give it a more non-governmental, non-CIA front. But it was very clear that NED was replacing the CIA in terms of directing the operations of the AFL-CIO international operations. And that's the NED has been functioning in that capacity ever since. Clearly, the motivations of the federal government, Reagan, Congress, in funding us is to oppose any progressive left-led movements in the labor movement around the world. And the Solidarity Center was in fact, and its precursor, the CIA as well, were very successful in destroying left-led movements, even left-led governments. And if we fast forward to today, the NED has sort of fulfilled its function for the U.S. government by, in fact, doing such debilitating effect on left-led movements. And kind of like today is now saying, well, you know what? We don't really need you anymore. You've done your work. And now we see the defunding of the Solidarity Center. And what's striking is that so far, there's not a word that's been said about it. And I just want to make a reference that there was an article that appeared in last November, shortly after Trump got elected. And it said, DOGE's, right, Department of Government Efficiency, best first target, the National Endowment for Democracy. So it's been in the crosshairs, and it's right up on the top of the list.
And of course, the AFL-CIO Solidarity Center have been involved in overthrows of governments, the Allende government, governments in Argentina and Brazil, and been involved in trying to overthrow the Venezuelan government. The operations of the AFL-CIO also have not been reported to the members. And in Colombia, where you were working with some GM workers who were fighting, the injured GM workers were fighting for compensation. They had an encampment for 11 years in front of the embassy, the U.S. embassy. That was never reported by the Solidarity Center Colombia operations, even though they're supposed to be reporting on what's going on in Colombia. Did that have anything to do with the fact that they really didn't want to fight U.S. multinationals in Colombia and in Latin America?
Well, it's very clear that the function of the Solidarity Center in Colombia in regard to the GM workers, the injured, fired GM workers, was to get the workers to agree to a proposal that would have satisfied General Motors, but it would have been completely debilitating for the workers. And the workers rejected this offer, which was over a decade ago. And subsequent to that, the Solidarity Center went along with General Motors and was satisfied to leave the workers in their tent encampment in front of the U.S. Embassy. So the Solidarity Center was basically, wanting to accommodate the interests of capital, and specifically of General Motors in Colombia. And it failed miserably because the workers didn't accept the inferior settlement. And from that point forward, the Solidarity Center was absolutely hush. and in some instances actually betrayed the workers at the encampment, which still exists and stands to this day. So they played not a very productive and constructive role for something in the name of international worker solidarity. Workers in this country, by and large, are not aware of the struggle and of the courage of these GM workers.
And Kim, you've written some books on the role of the AFL-CIO internationally, in the Philippines and other countries, and the operations. They operate in 62 countries. Their website is still up, and they've operated in the Philippines, Asia. Um, why the silence by the AFL-CIO about the shutdown of this major operation? They have 400 employees. They're all 62 countries, and not a word, no notice, no report by the AFL-CIO. What's going on?
Well, that's what we're trying to figure out. Obviously, they don't want attention to what they've been doing around the world. Something I've been writing on since 1989, trying to illuminate what's going on in different places. I mean, I found a case in the Philippines. I've written a book on the KMU of the Philippines, and in my research, I found out that the largest affiliate of the Trade Union Congress of the Philippines, which was a creation of the Marcos dictatorship, that they were trying to. This affiliate was trying to take the largest copper mine operation from a KMU union, and they were collaborating with death squads. And I'm not exaggerating. I mean, several workers were killed. Even the mother of one of the workers was killed. So they've done work like this. We've exposed that. Rob McKenzie came out with a very good book called El Golpe about the operations in Mexico. So over time, both before and after the NED, the National Endowment the Solidarity Center, the so-called Solidarity Center, has been funded by U.S. government money, and they don't want anybody to know. They don't want the members to know. They don't want the public to know. And I think what they're doing is they're just, their whole operation that's been funded by U.S. government money instead of workers' dues or whatever. They don't want the public to know that that's out there. And I think they're embarrassed. I think at best they may be ashamed. But they don't want this stuff to come to light. And on the other hand, we think it's important that it do come to light because we believe that workers' solidarity should be created by workers, that it should be funded by workers, it should be reported on workers, it should be transparent to workers. And the AFL-CIO, by depending on the U.S. government, has decided on the AFL-CIO leadership, because it's never gone to the members. They've decided that they want to take U.S. government money. It's a lot easier to get and do whatever they want to behind the backs of their members.
And Frank, your brother, who worked for this agency, he was actually trained at the Histadrut offices in Israel, and the AFL-CIO supports the Histadrut. It's a corporate trade union that supports Zionism, supports, in fact, the IDF is funding the IDF. This whole relationship between the AFL-CIO leadership and the Histadrut and the genocide going on, is that connected to what the U.S. government has been doing? I mean, it seems like that is an important issue for workers in this country who oppose the genocide that's going on right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think my brother's training was in pro-imperialist labor foreign policy. So when he was in El Salvador, and he did go to Israel to be trained by the supposed Labor Federation of Israel, but actually it's a company in its own right. His training was a means by which
Oh,
You've
shit.
got muted, Frank.
Yeah. Sorry, Frank.
okay.
You're right. Okay.
So my brother was trained in how to defang, basically, the agrarian movement in El Salvador, which was very militant, and who are up against these aristocratic landowners, much like our plantations in the U.S. South. And his role was to get them a little to preserve the system. That was his role. And that came directly from Histadrut. And of course, Histadrut carried out those policies directly in Israel and Palestine, and has supported, I mean, while he was getting his training from Histadrut, Israel was supplying the weapons to El Salvador's military and also Nicaragua and so on. So it was, they talk about soft power, and then they talk about military, carrot and the stick. That's what was being carried out. And my brother was the carrot while they're functioning with the stick and assassinating 40,000 campesinos in El Salvador around the time that he was killed.
And the AFL-CIO and the history were also involved in supporting the South African government. Chief Buzalezi, they gave $1 million to arm thugs who then were murdering trade unions and their families in South Africa during the unionizing drive. And the AFL-CIO gave an award to Chief Buzalezi, the George Meany Award, for his good work in South Africa. So it seems that this history of the AFL-CIO international operations have been not to help workers around the world. Although I've talked with some of the members of the Solidarity Center, and in fact, they're in the OPEIU, they're union members, and they claim they're doing good work around the world, that they're helping out workers organize. I know in Thailand, they say they're organizing, but they've never taken up the fact, for example, in Thailand, and anybody can be jailed for simple criticism of the monarchy. So it seems like their kind of organizing is a specific aim towards building corporate unionism, business unions in other countries, or unions that will not fight the United States and U.S. imperialism.
Yeah, I think it's really important to recognize that the way the conservative movement, the MAGA movement, the intellectual arm of it, the way they see it, is that the NED fulfilled its function in crushing left-wing and movements and governments. And now, having accomplished that mission, the Solidarity Center, and the other part of its mission was sort of to kind of oppose fascism, to oppose the right. And right now, with the Trump regime, they're not looking too favorably on any kind of centrist opposition, as what the Solidarity Center would provide, any centrist opposition to fascism and to these right-wing movements. And it's articulated in their own documents that this is the reason they're now going after the Solidarity Center. In other words, you fulfilled your function, you're kind of messing with us now, we've had it, you're done. I think it represents an incredible opportunity for our labor movement to now look at this failed strategy, so-called, of the AFL-CIO for labor solidarity internationally and say, clearly that was really phony. It was dependent on the U.S. government. The U.S. government pulled the plug. It is now up to us to pick up the pieces and say, how do we build a real international solidarity movement worthy of the name?
And Kim, what is your view? Because the shutdown of this agency, the Solidarity Center, now raised the question, what kind of solidarity are U.S. unions going to have? For example, the Solidarity Center supported the privatization in Ukraine of the economy. Randy Weingarten, who's a supporter of the Solidarity Center, went there, called for them to overthrow the government. At the same time, the Solidarity Center was helping unionists who were in favor of privatization of the mines, of the farmlands in Ukraine. It seems like the Solidarity Center's international operations was to support privatization around the world. Now the Project 2025 is for the total privatization of the public services, public education in the United States. Do you think there needs to be a connection, that this role that the Solidarity Center had in supporting privatization has now come home because the right wing, the MAGA, the fascists, want to destroy public services, public education in the United States?
Oh, I think absolutely, Steve. I think they've been doing their work around the world to kind of figure out how to do it. without Americans knowing about it. I think they're coming back. We're seeing it today. There were so many lies and obfuscations, hiding what Trump wanted to do. And I think what we're seeing is through these attacks is that you're right, he wants to privatize everything, sell off public services so his corporate buddies can get rich. I think what we're seeing they're not, although he said he was going to improve the lives of most working people, I think that was a lie in the first place, a cynical lie on top of it. But unfortunately, people chose to believe that. But what we're seeing now already is he's showing his hand. He doesn't care about working people. He wants to only promote things that are going to hurt us, make our lives more difficult. Look at all the people that are being laid off without any notice or anything like that. Even people who've worked for the government, for years and have counted on those jobs and stuff. Boom, they're gone. He's clearly oriented his operations towards his billionaire buddies, and he's going to screw the rest of us. And I think we have to understand this, and we have to fight back. And I think the way to do that is to try to find good people across the country and build organizations with them to challenge this, to refuse to go silently in the night, to resist at every level Trump's plans, because they're bogus. I don't think they will stand examination, but and hopefully the courts will do something, but we can't count on that. Ordinary people have to start noticing what's going on, start paying attention, finding other good people to unite with, and then building organization and coalitions across the country to stop this.
And Frank, one of the issues facing the working class in the United States now is the tariffs, the trade war, the tariffs on not just China, but Mexico, on Canada, to invade Panama, take back Panama. I mean, it seems like the plan of Trump and his actual action is to pit U.S. workers against Mexican workers and Canadian workers. And in the auto industry, that could be devastating, since the auto industry is integrated. Do you think there should be a united effort of auto workers in the three countries to unite against these attacks, whether they come from Trump or their own governments?
Yeah, I think that, in fact, I had a Canadian auto worker, retired, reach out to me and, very concerned about the labor movement embracing tariffs, because it's going to be pitting Canadian workers against U.S. workers, as you were saying, and also Mexican workers. What we need now is not Trumpian nationalism, which has some appeal. That idea of America first has an appeal, because by the success of the AFL-CIO muting left voices, it's all that's left is America first. But we know, as people who've been involved in the labor movement for many years, that the only ticket out of the plight that we're facing as workers is to unite across borders, to dismiss borders, and say we have solidarity that will trump division.
And OPEIU, why don't you talk about that? Because I know that you and Kim, I work with it as a project, is try to have meetings to educate working people in this country, and also to demand that there be an accounting, particularly in Chile. Last year was the 50th anniversary of the Chile coup. They've never apologized. They've never compensated the thousands of trade unions that were injured, murdered, tortured as a result of that coup. Do you think it's time now for accountability of the international record of the AFL-CIO, for people to be held accountable about what the AFL-CIO did in the name of American workers?
So I can answer that, and then Kim. My thinking is that the first item of business is to call for re-examination of how do we go forward with genuine labor solidarity across borders. And in the course of beginning to answer those questions about how are we going to reconstruct, we're in a period of reconstruction with what's just happened. And we're going to want the most creative juices across the entire labor movement to come up with answers, and to, in the course of coming up with those answers, to exposing what was the shortcomings and what was the absolute betrayal by the AFL-CIO. But I think our focus should be on reconstructing a genuine labor solidarity that will begin to have some muscle and power across, across national boundaries.
Okay, Kim?
I certainly follow Frank on this. I think there's got to be the efforts to build this solidarity. One of the things that I don't think has been taken advantage of is the weakness of the capitalists for their global trade and stuff, because that trade has to go across the docks. It has to be loaded onto trucks, and sometimes trains and transported. Workers have a lot of power once they realize that. I think the capitalists do not want us to understand that. They don't want us to be thinking about how doing that. But I think it's true, and it's been something. I've been working with literally for 40 years, trying to build some of these connections, show how we can do this. I think we need to get more people in there. I think the strength of workers. None of us may be Albert Einstein by ourselves. But when you get a bunch of workers together and you present, the facts to them in as clear as possible way, most of them are capable of very critical thinking. And when they're pushed, they'll come up with solutions. We know what's going on. We know what time it is, as they often say. But we've got to do that. We've got to encourage that. And that requires a repudiation of taking money from the government. That distorts anything we want to do. We've got to end that dependency that I think Trump has eradicated for us for his own purposes. But I think we need to rise to the occasion and say, let's start looking at this stuff seriously. How can we build these things? How can we build links between auto workers in these different countries? How can we build links between port workers, or truck drivers or railroad train crews, things like that. We've got to look at that, and we need people to look at that. Now, one of the things I would encourage people to do is OPEIU, Labor Education Project on AFL-CIO International Operations, has been doing a number of webinars over the year. We have a website. It's very easy to find. Just put the letters LEPAIO, LEPAIO, into your browser, and it'll come up first thing. Look at some of our webinars. We're trying to work to make our website even more functional, but certainly there's a number of websites. There's stuff about the History that was being talked about earlier. There's stuff about South Africa, what happened there. I've talked on the Philippines. The material is there. I did a book in 2010 on their foreign operations. Jeff Shirky just brought out a book this year on their foreign operations. Material's out there. And if people are willing to work with us, and we're willing to work with almost anybody that wants to build international labor solidarity with workers around the world, we want you, and we want to invite you to check out our stuff and to join us.
Well, I want to thank you very much for joining us. It looks like we're breaking the story nationally about the closure of a Solidarity Center. So hopefully when workers hear that it's closed, we can begin the discussion and debate. What was it doing? How much money did it take? Over $1 billion. How come working people in this country don't even know about what it was doing and the kind of money it was taking and where it was going? So thanks for joining us on Work Week. Thanks for joining in Solidarity, brothers.
Solidarity. Thank you, Steve, for doing this.